Hey everybody, today we are debating creation versus evolution, and we are starting right now. Hey everybody, stoked to have you here for this special debate. This is going to be a great time. Whew, I'm excited. My heart is beating right now because I'm so pumped up. My goal in this whole channel of the goal of the channel is I was just telling Godless Engineer, we want people to feel welcome. So if you are a Christian, atheist, Muslim, postmodernist, whatever you are, we're glad you're here, and we'd love to get to see you again. If you enjoy this content, feel free to consider hitting that subscribe button. We're excited you just saw a trailer for a debate with Dr. Michael Brown and Digital Hammurabi coming up. So very excited for that. But am I as excited as I am right now for this debate right now? What could beat it? So I want to let you guys know the links are down in the description. If you're like, man, this is really interesting. I've never thought of that before. I want to check his stuff out. Well, it's conveniently right down there in the description box so you can click on their link and see their channel. Or maybe you're like, oh, that's standing for truth. I can't take it. Well, you can go click on that link, troll him all you want at his channel. So, with that, just want to give the speakers a chance to kind of share what they've been up to at their channel. Just give you a little taste, so like maybe just a couple sentences about things that they're excited about at their channel, and then we will jump right into the format I'll explain for the debate, and then we'll get right into the discussion. So with that, Godless Engineer, first time here, thanks so much for coming on. We appreciate you spending your time with us. If you want to share what you've been up to at your channel, we're all ears.
Yeah. So, over on my channel, I do atheist related content as well as science related content. A lot of that's kind of based on the flat earth discussion and responding to those. But we also do like evolution kind of content and just atheist like related, like the religion topic sort of content where I do response videos. And we even have a Bible podcast where we're reading through the Bible front to back right now. So we do all that. We also have like memberships over there. We got the Skeptic Mafia and everything. So it's a really great time over there on the GD channel.
You bet. Well, we're glad you're here, and I can tell you, just from watching some of Godless Engineer's content, he's got a good sense of humor. I think, hopefully, I'm confident we'll see it tonight. He has self-effacing kind of guy. So, also, standing for truth, thank you for coming. We really appreciate you being here, spending your time with us. If you want to share what you've been up to at your channel, we are all ears.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me again, James. It's always a pleasure. I'm sure the audience is getting bored hearing all about my channel. I think this is maybe my 10th time on here, but just the usual stuff, lots of discussions, videos, primarily debunking atheism, evolutionism, debates, got a couple debates coming up. The closest one next week is going to be Ken Hovind versus Jim Majors on evidence for biblical creation, and a couple more fun ones at the end of the month. So I'm pretty excited. I think this is going to be a really wild month. So once again, thanks so much, Godless Engineer, for participating in the debate, and thanks again, James.
Yeah, you bet. Well, stoked to jump right into this. So here we go. This is the format: 10-minute openings, then 5-minute rebuttals, a 25-minute discussion section, and then 4-minute closings, followed by 25 minutes of Q&A. And I'm going to try to move so fast through the Q&A, sometimes I don't get to all the questions, and I promised the debaters we would respect their time by ending it at 25 minutes. So we will fly through that, or I will fly through that in reading the questions. So with that, given that I just realized given that it's creation versus evolution, we hadn't discussed, I'm embarrassed that I hadn't asked you guys who wants to go first. If you guys have a preference, it's really ultimately I want it to be up to you guys. Do you guys have a preference on who goes first?
I do not.
Doesn't matter. I can certainly go first. Doesn't matter to me, James.
You got it. Okay,
That's
then,
easier, more convenient. I don't mind.
then we will, standing for truth, if you're happy with it, we will have you go first. And I am starting the clock for 10 minutes, and or setting the clock for 10 minutes. I will start it on your first word.
Awesome. Well, I'll just share my screen here real quick, James.
You bet.
get these out of the way and we should be good. All right, you can see everything good?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Well, let's get this party started. Been looking forward to this, so this should be fun. Tonight, biblical creation versus evolutionism, creation, Adam and Eve, the fall, and evidence. We constantly hear that there's no evidence for biblical creation and that evolutionary theory best explains our origins. For example, this quote from Frank Zindler from a debate with William Lane Craig, I believe it was, perfectly sums up the importance of defending biblical creation. What he said was, the most devastating thing, though, that biology did to Christianity was the discovery of biological evolution. Now that we know that Adam and Eve never were real people, the central myth of Christianity is destroyed. If there never was an Adam and Eve, there never was an original sin. If there never was an original sin, there is no need of salvation. If there is no need of salvation, there is no need of a savior. And I submit that puts Jesus, historical or otherwise, into the ranks of the unemployed. I think that evolution is absolutely the death knell of Christianity. A literal Genesis. Is this really true, this quote? Is there no evidence for biblical creation, Adam and Eve, and a literal Genesis? Genetic evidences for Genesis. There are three main events in Scripture, in Genesis to be specific, that we can address with modern genetics. The events are the creation of Adam and Eve, the flood of Noah, and the Tower of Babel. The Bible tells us that it's the history book of the universe. Starting with this as a basic assumption, we can test the Bible to scientific discoveries and see how well this fits. The Bible tells us that Adam is the father of all people. Genesis 2:7 says, and the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. We see no evolutionary history of mankind here. There is not even a hint at fish to fisherman, bacteria to biologists, evolution in this verse. According to the Bible, we were made perfect and in the image of God. Genesis 2:21-22 says, and the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall upon Adam. And he slept, and he took one of his ribs and closed up the flesh instead thereof. And the rib which the Lord God had taken from man made he a woman and brought her unto the man. We started with two people, one man and one woman. And these are very significant statements about genetics. Genesis 9:18-19, we read, in the sons of Noah that went forth of the ark were Shem and Ham and Japheth, and Ham is the father of Canaan. These are the three sons of Noah, and of them was the whole earth overspread. Like I said, the Bible tells us that it's the history book of the universe. Evidence here that refutes evolutionism and confirms the Bible. All human beings are profoundly similar genetically, and this points directly to Adam and Eve. If you only started with two people, that restricts the diversity today. Over deep time, it's obvious that any large population will most certainly accumulate enormous numbers of mutations, resulting in enormous amounts of genetic diversity. This is a serious problem for evolutionary theory because it is now clear that mankind has very limited genetic variation. While the observed low genetic diversity is a massive problem from the evolutionary perspective, this is most certainly expected and predicted from the biblical perspective. The Bible predicted this thousands of years ago. From the biblical-based model, we all come from just two people, obviously, Adam and Eve, as we've read in the passages before in the previous slides. This obviously means that limited diversity is easy to explain. Like I said, the Bible predicted this. This means the death and demise of the evolutionary bottleneck theory and the evolutionary out of Africa theory. It is now clear and evident that there exists a singular female ancestor of all humans, which is referred to as mitochondrial Eve, and her basic DNA sequence is easily discernible and detected in humans alive today. And it is not more similar to a chimpanzee, contrary to what the evolutionists would have you believe. There is also clearly and evidently a singular male ancestor of all humans alive today, referred to and known as Y chromosome Adam. His DNA sequence is largely known, and contrary to what evolutionists believe, it is not at all similar to that of chimpanzees. Look at Noah's flood. What does this tell us? This story tells us that all people should be closely related. It tells us there should only be a few mitochondrial DNA lines as Shem, Ham, and Japheth's wives, and only one Y chromosome since it's only Noah. His three sons would have inherited his Y chromosome. and we should have significant evidence of rapid population growth. It turns out that this too is exactly what we find in modern genetics. This all did not have to be true. More predictions. The Tower of Babel account. We have found a single dispersal of all people in a relatively recent past traveling in small people groups into uninhabited territory through the Middle East. They call it the Out of Africa story, but these are all biblical-based predictions. Icing on the cake for biblical creation, more and more evidence. I can go on all day. Humans are fundamentally different from all other forms of life when we consider genomics and functionality. We see that genetic change is actually down and not up. We are therefore devolving due to mutation accumulation. Information in our genomes cannot arise via mutation and natural selection, as we now know that there exist multiple overlapping codes in our DNA. All you have to do is picture. Just imagine receiving an email and finding that it has 3 totally different messages, where you get one message when you read it normally, one evident message when read in reverse, and one when reading every other letter. This indicates data compression at the highest level, which extends far beyond any computer program ever written by man. And we're just beginning to understand the DNA language. The junk DNA era has been completely overturned and is no longer a valid form of evidence for evolutionists. Molecular clocks and other dating methods most consistently point to a young genome. There's actually plenty of evidence that man and dinosaurs coexisted, and there's also evidence that the Earth was once underwater. Quick detour, time to be a big boy now, guys. Now that we've seen just some of the evidence for biblical creation, it's time for evolutionists to grow up and quit believing in fairy tales. There never was a man named Peter Parker who was bit by a radioactive spider, giving him spider-like abilities. The original Spider-Man trilogy with Tobey Maguire swinging from building to building with his spider webs was a great trilogy and all, but it's just not true. You've been lied to. It's time to start believing the truth. Yes, there is evidence for biblical creation, and no, absolutely not. There is no evidence for pond scum to people and goo to you evolution. Devolution is what we observe. Evolution is not. This is what we expect given a biblical-based model. How much more time do I have, James?
You got 2 minutes and 45 seconds.
Beautiful. Michael Behe said in his book, Darwin Devolves, and it flows perfectly, Darwinian evolution proceeds mainly by damaging or breaking genes, which counterintuitively sometimes help survival. In other words, the mechanism is powerfully devolutionary. It promotes the rapid loss of genetic information. Laboratory experiments, field research, and theoretical studies all forcefully indicate that. As a result, random mutation and natural selection make evolution self-limiting. Darwin's mechanism works chiefly by squandering genetic information for short-term gain. Pond scum to people evolution is pure imagination. It's science to say that dogs produce dogs. It's not science. It's not empirical science to say that dogs, pine trees, bacteria, and whales are related. Evolutionists imagine that mutations make something new and better. Incremental changes is what they say. Evolutionists imagine that all these small-scale variations will eventually add up to make something we don't actually observe. Time, as I've always said, is the hero of the story for the evolutionists. Evolutionists are confused. They confuse adaptation to environments and evolution of higher life forms as if they were the same thing. Evolutionists, as I've said, they're confused. It doesn't take a genius to see that these are different issues. Adaptation can routinely be accomplished by loss of information, but the development of higher life forms always requires a large increase in net information. We're all actually mutant. We can see that genomes are devolving and the genome is rusting out like a car. Things are going down and not up. All modern scientific evidence points to the decay and destruction of an originally perfect design and creation. As I've said, empirical evidence suggests that everything, including all life, is subject to entropic decay. We observe devolution and not evolution. These near neutral, low impact, deleterious mutations, they're degenerating our information systems. Looking backward, the sad reality of this genetic degeneration demands a literal Adam, a literal Eve, and a literal fall. Just look at the decline in ages at death. We can actually see that the lifespan as recorded in Genesis strongly supports the historicity and truth of the Bible, and in particular, the book of Genesis.
38
There's more and more evidence I could go through, but for now, that should be more than enough to give the fatal blow to evolutionary theory. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much for that opening statement from Standing for Truth. We'll switch back over to the dialogue boxes, and I will set the timer for 10 minutes. And Godless Engineer, I will start the clock on your first word.
All right. Well, thank you, James, for having me here on Modern Day Debate. I really appreciate the chance to, I guess, defend evolution in this particular discussion. I also appreciate Standing for Truth for making the time to come here and debate me about it. Now, so my initial talk here is not going to be in rebuttal to Standing for Truth. Obviously, I was taking notes, but just keep in mind that none of this is meant to refute anything that he said directly. So I'm just going to kind of go through my notes and what I've written down. So one of the best things about any scientific theory is its ability to make predictions. And so if evolution is true, it's predicted that we should find evidence for evolution in a lot of different avenues. Today, I'm going to try to go over biological evidence, fossil evidence, and direct observation. And just to note, it doesn't, well, like one particular piece of evidence or one particular avenue that you go down is not going to refute evolution outright. That's a ridiculous claim for anybody to make, that one single piece of evidence would totally topple all of evolution. So first, let's go through the biological evidence. We should see evidence for evolution in genetics in various ways. The driving force behind this is mutation of genes over generations of organisms. We have directly observed increased genetic variety in the population, increased genetic material, novel genetic material, and novel genetically regulated abilities. Mutations being the driving force of evolution is undeniably proven by modern science. Most of these mutations that occur are neutral. Some are harmful, but those are prevented from propagating throughout the species or the population. And it prevents them from passing it on. And then the good mutations that happen, those allow the organism to survive better in the environment that it's in. So that's about good mutations, bad and neutral ones. Now, there's also a thing called epigenetics, which plays a big role in evolution. In fact, epigenetics only makes sense with respect to evolution. Epigenetics plays into the adaptation that you see. And we can go over that in a little bit more detail if we want to later on in the discussion. But since it wasn't a primary thing in Standing for Truth's opening, I'll reserve that for later. Now, evolution takes a long time to occur. I know it was brought up in Standing's initial thing that time is very important to evolution, and it is, because all of these changes take place over millions of years, and it takes a long time for one animal or one organism to change into a completely different animal or organism. In order for the flood story to make sense, the animals on the ark would have to produce about 11 new species every single day. I mean, that is literally a cat pooping out a completely different animal, and other animals just creating new versions of themselves immediately on first birth, I guess. So that doesn't really make a lot of sense. So as far as the biological evidence goes, one big question that I have for Standing for Truth is, what do you mean by like a loss of specificity or a loss of information when it comes to genes? And also, what does genetic degradation actually look like? Because I'm really confused by those concepts, and it seems like you don't really have a very well-defined idea of what that actually means. Now, to go on to fossil evidence, there's a lot of fossil evidence for evolution. Our fossil record clearly shows an indication of different species temporally following each other through time. As mentioned before, we know whales, I mentioned that in my epigenetics talk thing, but whales evolved from quadruped ancestors that were land animals. And we know this because of the vestigial limbs that we find in both whales and dolphins. Now, evolution has also predicted that the fossil record would show different organisms living at different times. The geologic column is a perfect example of this. this. The geologic column is a product of uniformitarianism. Uniformitarianism means that changes in the Earth's crust during our geological history have resulted from the action of continuous and uniform processes. This is how we actually observe everything to operate in reality for as long as we've been taking notice. But this results in fossils of animals appearing in specific layers of Earth that correlates to the time frame they lived in. And it seems reasonable enough, right? Uniformitarianism is the only viable explanation for why fossils are found where they are found. Considering the other explanation is that during a worldwide flood, multiple different layers of rock were laid down neatly on top of each other, and then each layer only contained certain types of animals. I feel like it's more probable that uniformitarianism and the geologic column being laid down over time is the actual situation. Using evolutionary theory and the geologic column, there have been numerous fossils that were predicted to be found and were subsequently found, like the transitional fossil between teethed and baleen whales. Tiktaalik's fossil was found in the same manner. They predicted where and approximately what layer of the Earth it should appear in, and they were able to find those fossils. Now, we also have direct observation, which evolutionary theory has a lot to predict. Now, in 2016, there was an experiment on bacteria by the Harvard Medical School that shows bacteria adapting to higher and higher concentrations of antibiotics. Now, evolutionary theory also predicts that flightless island birds descend from the nearest land-dwelling bird species, and that every island would have a species of flightless bird that is specific to that island. And this has found out to be true. Evolutionary theory has also predicted a number of different transitional fossils that were later found. We have also been able to predict specific traits that exist in these transitional fossils. And so how much time do I have, James?
You got 3 minutes exactly.
3 minutes. So if I can use this last few minutes to kind of go over, my whole point of this intro right here was to prove that evolution provides a predictable model that allows us to actually see things in reality, or to find things, or what to expect out of reality. And the reality of the situation is that evolution is true, and it does happen. The bacteria experiment proves that. Now, I would like to say that the use of evolutionism to make it some kind of like ism or ideology, I think, is quite disingenuous on Standing for Truth's part. Evolution doesn't ever try to talk about origins, like abiogenesis or anything like that. Evolution is just the change in a population of organisms over time, and that results in different species and just the diversity of life that we see. He also said that if there was never an Adam and Eve, that Christianity would be destroyed. I disagree with that. There's a majority of Christians today that don't consider Adam and Eve to be a historical people, and yet their faith is still intact, and Christianity is just fine. I think that you can take those as metaphorical and just be fine with it. He also said that the Bible is a history book of the universe. I would like to really disagree with that, considering that the fact that the Bible says that God spoke everything into existence, or he just turned a light on, or anything like that, when we actually know that after the Big Bang occurred, it was a few 100,000 years after that when the first light actually started. So it seems to me like it's not actually a history book of the universe. That's on top of all of the other problems that I have with Genesis and the Bible in general. Most of Standing for Truth's front end of his argument was just for the Bible tells me so, and I'll end with this: that if God did in fact make all of us and everything like that, then he laid down all of the evidence to point us in the direction of evolution. So that would make Standing for Truth's whole position a unfalsifiable narrative, meaning that you can't falsify anything he says, because he's always got an excuse for why it's that way, and his excuse is God did it. And you can't come to truth by just saying God did it and explain it away like that. So I believe I'll end there.
You bet. Thanks so much. And next up, for the rebuttal phase, I have set the clock for 5 minutes. So, standing for truth, when you are ready, I will click start on your first word.
Awesome. Well,
wait,
thanks so
hold on,
much there for your.
Forgive
no
me.
problem.
I just wanted to mention to the chat. I forgot to mention at the start. If you have a question for the Q&A, if you put at moderndaydebate in the live chat and then let us know which debater or if it's for both debaters, that helps us as we will then compile it into a list and ask as many as we can during the question and answer session at the end. And then, super chats. If you have a super chat, it also allows you to make a short comment towards one of the speakers to which they can give a response to. And then secondly, all of the super chats automatically go to the top of the list during the debate or during the Q&A. So with that, thanks for your patience. I will give you your full 5 minutes standing for truth. I didn't mean to cut in on you. So on your first word, I will start the timer for 5 minutes.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for that opening there, Godless Engineer. So I'll get right into it. It sounds like deep time is his rescuing device. That's kind of what I gathered from that opening. The more time we give Ponscum to evolution, Ponscum to people evolution to work its wonders, the more organisms become extinct. You know, time is not the hero of the plot for the evolutionists, as they'd like you to believe. It's actually it's actually the enemy. And he talked about epigenetics, but epigenetics doesn't actually add new novel information in any way, shape, or form. It's just basic adaptation, and that's really it. You know, no new novel and meaningful information is gained. Only a gene is expressed, a pre-existing gene, of course. So I'd have to ask him to name, a single beneficial mutation, say in man, that's not somewhat deleterious, because for the most part, the ones he could point to, they're really just based on an epigenetic tag, and they're not actually beneficial mutations. When it comes to his species argument about 11 species per day, that's actually wrong, because number one, we only started to document these speciation events the last century, and we can go deep into the created heterozygosity hypothesis and talk about the speciation, what makes more sense of the origin of species, either the creation model or the evolutionary model in our discussion period. But the fact that we've just begun to document these speciation events, we actually don't know the real speciation events, and we've actually made testable predictions based on this model that we can get into, that we actually look to genome functionality. Faster mutation rates, for example, in the past, due to the bad environmental conditions of post-flood, would lead to rapid speciation hundreds of years after the flood. But in short, most species today already formed in the past. So the 11 species per year is not really an argument at all. And like I said, we look to the created heterozygosity hypothesis. God encoded these pre-existing functional DNA differences into the created kinds, into Adam and Eve, and through processes such as gene conversion, recombination, that could lead to new species quick. And like I said, he talked about testable predictions, and of course the gold standard of science is making these testable and falsifiable predictions. And we've made it on mutation rates, we've made it on DNA function. So I'm sure we can actually talk about that. We're past the whole God did it thing because of the many testable and falsifiable predictions that we've made. For example, the tree that I always show, that Dr. Nathaniel Jensen has derived based on mitochondrial DNA, that points right back to Noah's 3 daughters-in-law, makes testable predictions on the stamp of civilization. So we can also talk about that. Another thing I got written down here was his fossils and Tiktaalik and whales, for example. I mean, fossils are just circumstantial evidence that actually requires a theory to account for it. And when it comes to the information loss, we can look at, shifts from heterozygosity to homozygosity. We can look at the fact that we accumulate 100 new mutations per person per generation. We can look at deletions. There's many different ways that we can actually calculate the information lot in a species. And he talked about how, you know, mutations, a lot of them, they're not harmful, they're neutral, but that would misunderstand the entire point of, for one, genetic entropy, and two, you know, neutral mutations in general. Because yes, most mutations are neutral from the perspective of the organism's physical fitness, right? The phenotype, of course, but all mutations they must have effect on the genetic content, which is the genotype. So in no way are mutations truly neutral. It all must have an effect on the genotype.
49 seconds.
So at 49 seconds. So if you look at Tiktaalik, you know, the claimed tetrapod traits, they're consistent with many living and extinct lobe-finned fish species today. And with the recent discovery of the Poland tetrapod tracks that actually predates Tiktaalik by nearly 20 million years, the evidence couldn't be any more clear. You know, Tiktaalik is a bottom-dwelling lobe-finned fish. It's not actually a missing link to land animals. It's also important that creationists also predict and expect nested hierarchies. They expect mosaic creatures like Tiktaalik, like, you know, platypus, for example, and whales, the presumed, you know, transitional forms he talks about, Pakicetus, Ambulocetus, Rhodocetus, they're highly questionable.
6 seconds.
The claim that these are all whale precursors is actually based more on speculation,
Time.
storytelling, and wishful thinking. Thanks,
Time.
James.
Thank you very much, Standing for Truth. We will now kick it over to Godless Engineer. I have the clock set, and I will start it on your first word.
Okay, so I'm going to kind of work backward up from his last rebuttal right here, from what I got written down. He mentions about the footsteps or whatnot predating Tiktaalik. That actually wasn't my point in bringing up Tiktaalik as to point to the bridge between sea life and land animals. My point was that evolution, it has a predictable model, and using the evolutionary model, they were able to predict where to find it and at what layer. So that validates evolution as being a good scientific theory for explaining like the diversity of life, because we are able to predict things, using it. So that was the point in that. He said that there's no neutral mutations really, that it's all really deleterious or whatever. That's actually not true. I would say that any mutation that's neutral would be one that has no bearing on the fitness of that particular organism or that particular species. And there are scientific studies that have been done that show these neutral mutations and how they're mostly neutral. All of the mutations, the 100 that he talks about per generation, most of them are neutral. There are some that are bad, but those don't get carried throughout the organism. The good mutations that are shown are carried throughout it. Like, he wants an example of this, and I would say that our vision in general is a good way to know that these good mutations do happen. Because most mammals have poor vision, and so us having the color vision that we do and everything like that, that's actually a genetic mutation that happened in our particular lineage. There's a lot of other things like lactose tolerancy, our ability to drink milk and milk products. That was a mutation. Another thing is the color of your eye and stuff like that. So there are good mutations that have helped us in one way or another, or just exist. Like, for instance, the color of the eye. I would say that those are probably mostly neutral, especially now, mutations, because those don't actually help us survive or anything like that. Let's see. He claims that fossils are circumstantial evidence. I would highly disagree with this, because he also cast doubt on the whole deep time and how that's kind of a sort of a saving grace for evolution. And it's not a saving grace for evolution, it's just part of our reality. I mean, in order to disagree with deep time and fossils in general, representing things in our past, you would have to forego like a lot of different scientific principles, like radioactive decay. Radioactive decay, allows us to actually gauge how long something has been around. And there's multiple different versions of radioactive decay. It's not just the carbon dating that everybody likes to hear about. There's also other ways to date things that are in the millions of years old, and that's how we actually date the fossils. You can either date the actual fossil or the rock that it's contained in, or you can look at the geologic column and see at what level it is in the geologic column and get a good idea of right about the time when that animal died. And those corroborate each other, obviously. He talks about Noah's 3 daughters being like some kind of like mitochondrial ancestor or whatnot. If you actually go to the Wikipedia page for the I forget what they're called. I'm sure Standing can let you guys know.
So
It's the
55
L,
seconds.
M, and N things. If you actually go there, L was first. That's mitochondrial Eve, if I'm not mistaken. And then if you follow the tree down, M and N come in on the 3rd level, and those are only split off of the middle, like L3 and 4 or something like that genes. So I mean, it doesn't really make a lot of sense for those 3 women at the exact same time to be representative of all those 3 things. Not to mention the fact that those particular genes date back way farther than 6,000 years.
20 seconds left.
Okay. He talks about genomic decay and the loss of information. I still didn't hear a good explanation as to what this information is, or how, or what it would look like for something's DNA to decay or degrade. I still don't know what that actually means. So if he could enlighten me about that.
Thank you very
Also, DNA is not a code.
Thank you very much. And with that, we will move into the 25-minute open discussion. So this is always my favorite part. It's exciting, engaging, and setting the timer for 25 minutes. The floor is yours, gentlemen.
Awesome. Well, you know what? I think, I appreciate your rebuttal there. I think a good way to start it, since it's probably going to, consist of a large portion of our discussion, would be, because I heard you say that, evolution for the most part, at least biological evolution, would mean, a change in allele frequency or gene frequency in populations over generations. Would you agree with that as a valid definition for biological evolution?
Well, yeah, I think that's specific enough, I guess.
I mean, do you believe that there would be any types of limits to that, like whether it's genomic, physical limits? Like, do you believe, let's say, do you believe you can get a dog, say, ever as big as, say, an elephant or a whale? We know there's animals that exist that are as big as, say, elephants and whales, or even a dog as small as, say, a flea. We know there's insects that exist that are as small as a flea, like a flea. So do you believe there's any type of limits to the change?
Well, I mean, obviously there's limits, because how an organism is actually, I guess built, if you will, it kind of dictates like how big it can get and whatnot. Like, you can never have a lizard as big as Godzilla. That's fantasy, obviously, but there's a lot of different limitations to that size. Things would have to work differently. But I also think that, just like with the fact that there are elephants and there are whales, if dogs started changing in that direction, they would just develop differently and be able to be that big, and they would no longer be dogs.
Right. So let's just say, if we look at what's empirically verified, like if we actually see, so I imagine you believe that, dogs, elephants, whales, pine trees and fleas are all related through common ancestry. But if we see, dogs today producing a variety of dogs, like obviously you got dogs that can adapt to heat, dogs that can adapt to the cold, but you're never going to get a dog to grow wings and fly. It's just not in the genetic code. You can believe something like that.
Do you seriously think that's what evolution is?
Evidence. Go ahead.
I mean, do you seriously think that that's what evolutionary theory says?
What I want to know, no, I know that it's not going to say that a dog is directly, it's incremental changes over time, of course, because I know you.
Okay. Can I? Sorry to interrupt, Standing, but I need to know, why then would you characterize it as such a dramatic change if you know that's not what evolution is? That's a straw man fallacy. This is basic like logic here.
Well, I'm
That's a
sorry to
straw
interrupt you.
man
No,
about-
I don't believe it's a straw man, because at some point you believe there is a single-celled organism that evolved into a multi-celled organism, a fish, an amphibian, a bird, a monkey, a man. These incremental changes would require, because if we're talking about that type of microevolutionary variation, where you get that change in the frequency of the expression of different traits, me and you, we're not disputing that. And that type of evolution obviously explains the survival
No.
of this, but not the arrival of this. If we
Hold
see
on,
dogs
Stanley.
produce dogs, how can you say that a dog today came from something that was non-dog long ago and far away? Like, where's your empirical evidence for that? If you believe there's limits, of course.
Okay, so first I'll answer what you were talking about first. So we know this because of fossil evidence that we found. We've found fossils in the past that connect dogs to a proto-dog-like animal, and you can trace all of those all the way back. This is another thing that evolutionary theory predicts, is that we'll find fossil series. And so we know, like, the evolutionary line of dogs and what came to be dogs, what we know dogs to be now. But still, you're totally you totally strawmanned evolution, and I can't let that go.
Well, I'm not really strawmanning it, because you just admitted that. I'm sorry to interrupt. You just admitted that. Well, obviously you're appealing to fossils. Yeah.
One sec, just because I know that I think there were maybe 2 points that you made. I want to give Godless Engineer a chance to respond to each one. I think there's
no. As long as you get equal time, and then I can address that as well. Go ahead.
All right, I'll let you. Just let me hold on. So, you characterize evolution as a dog producing a dog with wings. I mean, is that not how you characterized it?
Well, what I'm saying is obviously based on built-in genetic adaptation.
Yes or no questions,
single dog. Well, you can take every single dog in the world today and throw them into Alaska, and they're going to adapt. You're going to see over time, you're going to see those traits that are emphasized. You're going to have a population of, say, something like a husky, or take those dogs and put it into the deserts of Australia. Over time, you're going to get those traits emphasized through natural selection, not, random variation. You're going to see probably populations of dingoes, right? Short legs, skinny legs. But at the end of the day, you're still only going to get dogs producing more dogs. You're the one that's saying dogs and elephants and pine trees are related through common ancestry, and you're looking to the fossil record, which I did say was circumstantial evidence, because if all we see is change that's opposite of what is required for that type of pond scum to people evolution, well, you can believe in it all you want, but I'm just telling you that it's not empirical verified science, because we don't observe. And you can appeal to time, of course, all you want, and you can appeal to the fossil record all you want, but what do we see in the fossil record? We see stasis for the most part. We see something like a coelacanth, which according to evolutionists is millions and millions and millions of years old, and then it just disappears in the fossil record for millions and millions of years, and all of a sudden there they are swimming in the ocean today. So there's a lot of inconsistencies with your claims on the fossil record. That's why I believe you might be able to cherry pick some, proto dogs, quote unquote. But at the end of the day, those proto dogs would still be considered a dog to any 5-year-old today. But you're the one that's saying a dog today actually came from something legitimately non-dog long ago and far away. And I'm here to tell you that that's okay to believe that, capital B. But clearly there are limits, genomic, physical. You admitted that. You did say, I think, that, a dog today probably could, given enough time, given enough change, become something as big as an elephant, but it's just not observable science. All we see is limits. That's consistent with, what we would believe based on, say, pre-existing heterozygosity, pre-existing genetic built-in adaptation. Just seems...
Okay, can we stop this Gish Gallop?
Yeah, go ahead.
I was waiting for you to stop, but you just kept on going. Okay? So, all right. Honestly, I can't even recall what you were talking about there, because you just kind of seemed to go off on a diatribe. You were denigrating the use of fossils. I would like for you to explain to me, like on your Bible model here, how do you explain all of the different fossils from extinct animals that look incredibly similar to the next species, and then the next species, and then the next species? Answer me, how does the Bible explain those extinct species? But then also, why is it that God has made a linear progression from one animal to another to make it look like they evolved from one another? What are those two things?
Okay, well, I appreciate the questions. First off, and I'll answer it as thoroughly as I can. I would say to weaken, the fossil evidence, that you're using. Obviously, fossils, bones found in the dirt, they're not inherited. Traits are inherited. That's why when we look to genetics, we see that it confirms biblical creation. But if you actually want to talk about how we explain the fossil record, well, of course, we explain when you look at the geology of, say, the Earth, we would say, and I think it's pretty obvious that, present processes can't in any way, shape, or form explain what we actually see. Rather, what we see points to, catastrophic processes in the past, which I would say, and you were kind of appealing to uniformitarianism earlier, but I think the catastrophic processes that we clearly see with all the sedimentary layers and so on and so forth, that'd be confirmation of Noah's flood. I mean, I think all the evidence would point to, rapid plate tectonics and all the layers of fossils, all the fossils you actually see. The fact that we see stasis, that's strong indication that biblical creation would better explain it. And secondly, we would see burials by ecosystems. So I think that's better explained as compared to slow and gradual evolution and slow and gradual uniformitarianism. Go ahead.
Okay. Let me ask something real quick. Why is it that we only find certain fossils in certain layers? Why is it that we never find a fossil that is supposed to be older in the upper layers, like where it's younger, but we know that those particular organisms didn't exist at that time? Like, why aren't there any fossils of them trying to swim up through the geologic column? They're all laid down very nice and neat in a column, very ordered. Now, uniformitarianism can explain this. How does the Bible explain it? Because a flood does not actually explain it. You're not actually giving me any kind of explanations. You're just saying, oh, well, God did it, and that's it.
Well, I mean, I can give you a testable, falsifiable prediction based on what I talked about, catastrophic plate tectonics. I don't know if you'd agree, but I've had evolutionists agree that it does at least look like that there's evidence that the Earth was once underwater. I mean, if you want to talk about fossils, we see marine fossils on mountains and in landlocked areas that are actually far from the sea. And we see, sedimentary rock layers that actually extend, and I'm sure you'd agree with this, over entire continents or even farther. So it at least appears that the deposition of those layers, they had to have been catastrophic, or else there would not have been much fossilization to begin with. I mean, how do you explain fossils to begin with? What do you see? You see fossils of animals giving birth, fish being eaten. Doesn't that suggest sudden and rapid burial? I mean, it seems like all these observations, they are in accord with the biblical flood of Noah, which
so
covered
standing
the entire Earth thousands of years ago. I mean, that would be my answer. Go ahead.
Okay, so standing, how are mountains formed?
Well, we look to catastrophic plate tectonics to explain let's say Mount Everest or the Himalayas, for example, immediately post-flood. We look to, you would look to continental drift. We actually look to continental sprint, meters per second, continental sprint. And we actually have made a testable and falsifiable prediction. If you can kind of let me explain it, for example, we would say that—
But you haven't actually answered my question yet, so I'm a little agitated at this point.
I just told you through plate. Okay,
well, see, that's I mean, catastrophic plate tectonics is not how mountains are formed. Mountains are formed slowly over long periods of time when
exactly. But
as the plates.
That's how you think they're created.
No, this is
I'm
how
saying we look to catastrophic plate tectonics. We look to slow uniformitarian tectonics. I don't want to misrepresent me. Sorry,
go ahead. Just want to make sure you give him a chance to respond, Standing.
I just don't want to be misrepresented. He's saying that mountains are formed from slow uniformitarian processes. I'm saying they're formed from fast uniformitarian. And I've actually made a testable falsifiable prediction.
Mountains do not shoot up from the ground, Standing.
Mountains formed by the uplifting and collisions of the plates as a result of catastrophic plate tectonics that I'm talking about. I mean, all rock layers have ripple marks, meaning there was a global flood in the past, and the flood sorted animals by ecosystems. Like I said, sea creatures first, then land creatures, as you would expect in the flood. That's exactly what we see. And I've got a testable, falsifiable prediction that has been confirmed to give you evidence for everything I'm saying. I mean, I can either give it to you or not, but the evidence seems to correlate perfectly with the flood of Noah. I mean, I've answered your questions. You just don't seem to like it because you still have that uniformitarian assumption. Unfortunately.
Oh, you mean the mainstream science explanation of it? Yeah.
Well, the thing is, high mountains cannot reach that high unless a catastrophe with meters per second movement,
What
not
evidence do
slow
you have for
gradual
that
inches
statement?
per second per year like you're talking about.
What evidence do you have for that statement?
Man.
Have you seen a mountain form immediately, like right in front of you or something like that? Like, have you seen that happen or something?
Well, the global flood is an unrepeatable, unobservable event. That's why we've made a testable, falsifiable prediction. For example, these continents, according to the Bible's description of the fountains of the great deep breaking open, these continents are moving at rapid paces through the floodwaters. So the pre-flood ocean crust, it's dragged down into the mantle core. We call that subduction process, of course. But the prediction comes into play when the cold ocean crust should actually still be cold, since obviously, according to our model, this occurred only thousands of years ago, even though it has descended into the deep hot mantle. So seismic data actually, and you can look this up to yourself, I can provide the paper from NASA, it's actually revealed enormous slabs of cool rock that are under North America. So down in the core itself, what I'm saying, which should be warm, it's actually confirmation of flood geology. And we've seen rapid magnetic reversals, also confirmation of the flood. So everything I'm saying, it's not just a just so story.
I don't see how that's confirmation of a flood happening. Can I ask like a totally different question?
Like, do you want to move off the topic of, if you want to move off flood geology for now and go back to, because you can ask me another question, but then I want to ask, because I kind of noticed that you didn't really address much of my opening presentation in regards to mitochondrial Eve.
When have I had time, Standing?
Well, in your rebuttal period, wasn't that to address my opening? Because in my rebuttal period, I addressed your opening for the most part.
How many minutes did we get for our rebuttal, Standing? 5 minutes? You expect me to go through all of your claims and everything like that in 5 minutes?
But
I don't have the luxury of just being like, God did it.
But the thing is, that was well, for one, I've already shown you that my explanations are not based on God did it, and even the speciation.
Actually, that's the only thing that you have said. You have said that, oh, the geologic column, the thing that we said there, how'd that happen? Oh, God did it. And how do you say that? Oh, the flood did it, which God did. And then everything else has been because God did it.
I've given you testable and falsifiable predictions that actually confirm what I'm saying.
How are they falsifiable? Give me one of the things that you have said. Tell me how it's falsifiable.
Okay, why don't we go into the pre-existing heterozygosity model, for example?
No. Flood. We were talking about flood. You want to stay on flood. Let's do flood. Tell me, how were your statements falsifiable?
The statements that I just told you about the global flood being falsifiable in regards to the catastrophic plate tectonics model, if you want me to go into it again, we would predict, based on the fact that the fountains of the Great Deep broke open and that we're looking to catastrophic plate tectonics versus slow and gradual uniformitarian processes. For one, the mountains that I'm talking about that are formed from the uplifting and the collisions of the plates as a result of this, we've made a prediction. So we predicted that the cold ocean crust, if our model is true, it should still be cold, since this occurred only thousands of years ago. So we
how is that falsifiable? Tell me, how is that falsifiable?
It would be falsifiable if we were to test that, okay, as we made the actual prediction about the cold ocean crust being still cold, because it's only occurred thousands of years ago. If that wasn't true, it actually was warm or hot like it should be down in the core itself, that would falsify the actual theory. But what we've seen based on seismic data from NASA, it's revealed enormous slabs of cool rock under North America. So that was a confirmation of catastrophic plate tectonics. I mean, it's right in the Bible, fountains of the Great Deep.
No. How does that prove it? I mean, I'm not really seeing the actual proof here as far as it being distinguished from the scientific model, because we're far off from like the evolutionary model at this point. Okay, this is geology and shit. So now, how is that different from the evolutionary model or the scientific model in general? Because on the scientific model, the Earth formed 4.5 billion years ago, and then the Earth's crust cooled sometime later.
Obviously there's a lot of storytelling.
Hold on. I'm not finished, Standing. I'm not finished. I want to hear what you got to say, but let me finish. And then it cooled, and then like the oceans eventually came about, and continents and everything like that, and then plate tectonics were there, which there are actually still like lava that spews out from the seabed floor on occasion. That's how some islands were even formed. So I'm trying to figure out here how that particular prediction is actually in favor of your model and against the regular scientific model, because I don't really like, I don't see you refuting the current
Okay.
scientific model. I just
Well,
see you planting your flag saying, oh, this proves God.
okay, well here, let me go. So you're the one that brought up fossils. You're asking me, how do I explain the fossil record? How do I explain the geology according to my model? Then we talked about mountains, and I'm telling you that high mountains cannot reach that high unless a catastrophe with meters per second movement, according to the catastrophic plate tectonic model, were to occur, not the slow, gradual inches per second per year that you're actually talking about. I've given you a testable prediction that's actually been confirmed, and you can actually look at the articles that actually support this seismic data. So I'm explaining to you how, I mean, obviously we veered off of, say, genetics and evolutionary theory, towards this, but I've now given you a testable prediction based on the fact that the fountains of the Great Deep break open, the earth is fractured like an eggshell. We look to this model of catastrophic plate tectonics, and there's your confirmed prediction. So in regards to that, that would confirm flood geology. If we want to look to genetics,
No,
if we want
it
to look
doesn't.
to, go ahead. I don't know how much more I can. I mean, you asked for evidence. You're the one who brought up in your opening, science, empirical science. It's all about testable and falsifiable predictions. So that's what I'm
Actually, I didn't say anything about that. I said that one of the key factors of any scientific theory is its predictability, the ability of the model or the theory to predict things that we would find in reality. That's what I actually said.
Well, okay, let me ask you in regards to, say, evolutionary theory, predictability, how much of our genome would you predict, or would you say is functional? Like, do you have from what I've heard from evolutionists, it's a maximum of between 10 and 20%. Do you have a number that you can put on that?
Well, I mean, if you're just going to answer the question that you just asked me, I don't even know why you're even trying to get an answer out of me.
Well, because what I'm saying is
pointless to ask a question and then immediately give my answer to it. I'm not saying that is my answer, because honestly, I don't know. And it's fine for me not to know. But the fact that however much of our genome is functional or whatever, that doesn't dispute all of the other evidence out there. It doesn't dispute anything, actually. It's just a statement that I don't know is even true.
Well, no, because genetics is actually where we can look to verify the, competing hypotheses, and DNA function.
That's a good point to bring up. Explain the loss of information.
Well, for one, okay, I want to at least finish this because for the audience sake, I want to show them that we do have testable predictions in regards to DNA function. So if you don't want to give us, your answer to how much you believe that it is functional, we've already made predictions.
How is that going to help the conversation right now? I really don't understand, like, how me telling you how much of our DNA is functional.
Because I want us to have a good discussion on hypotheses, and we want to test those hypotheses to see whose model is stronger. And I'm saying that we've predicted, based on our speciation model of pre-existing functional DNA differences, that we predict that the vast majority of our genome is actually going to be functional. We can see already that based on, say, for example, the ENCODE project, which has given us evidence that over 80% of our genome is at least transcribed in RNA, which suggests function. A lot of it is, preliminary, but certain developmental windows were not tested during that. So we've actually put on paper this hypotheses and the predictions that flow from it. So you can actually go in the lab and test it yourself. That's why I'm asking you, okay, so we've made this prediction. The vast majority of our DNA differences, whether it's nuclear DNA differences, mitochondrial DNA differences, are functional. You can make a prediction as well, and then we can go test it, and that's what science is all about. So that's why, if you don't think that that's going to progress our discussion, we are talking about models here. So I think we should put forth competing explanations and hypotheses and then test them. Would you not agree?
I don't understand how we can test them here just for us. I mean, I am not fluent in that particular part of genetics. So maybe I can get back to you later. But what I can tell you right now is that whatever point that you're trying to make right here is not actually going to help you in the genetic debate. Because I mean, can you please? I just really need to know before we're done with this conversation, what exactly is a loss of information concerning DNA, and also what does genetic degradation look like?
Okay, so if you want to get into that, I'm just going to add the other portion by saying that, and then I'll answer that question directly. Is the fact that evolutionists predicted a genome of junk, while we predict high levels of function, and now the trajectory is pointing us towards high levels of function. For example, as ENCODE is revealed. So I'm just saying that our model.
I disagree with everything that you just said, because I really don't think that that is what evolution predicts. Genome of junk. So,
well, of course, evolutionary leftovers, genome fossils, of course, that's what they predict. Well, but we can move on if that's what you'd like. So if you're looking at, what was that? Did you say something?
If Godless Engineer is finished, then I'll not interrupt you. Otherwise, if there was something you wanted to add, I just want to make sure that he got to have his say back as well.
No. How much time do we have in the discussion portion? I just want to make sure we got enough time for this.
Minute 15.
Okay, then for that exact question, we know it's a fact, and hopefully you agree with it, that we transmit a small amount of mutations to our children. It's generally known that the mutation rate is now 100 mutations per person per generation. How much of those is near neutral and neutral is debatable, and we could probably talk about that for hours and hours. But we can actually look at certain mutations like duplications, inversion mutations, deletions. We can look at shifts from heterozygous.
I've got to forgive me. Just so Godless Engineer gets the last 45 seconds or so of the live discussion, I just want to interject. Just forgive me. I know that you're trying to give a response. I'm sorry. I just want to make sure that it's roughly fairly balanced.
No problem. So to make it short, to measure, information loss, we can look at shifts from heterozygosity to homozygosity. We can look at deletions in the genome. A deletion in a genome implies that something has been lost. And I know it's an evolutionary tactic to avoid the fact of genetic degeneration by saying, well, what does that mean, loss of information? Well, we know that all mutations are deleterious. We know that beneficial mutations are overwhelmingly rare. I mean, everybody admits to that. So that is what we see as a loss of information. Go ahead. I'll give you the remaining time.
Scott, about 45 seconds.
Okay, so actually everything that you said there about genes, mutations, everything is completely wrong. I still don't know what loss of information means, because it's a lot like saying, oh, Diet Coke is a loss of information from regular Coke. It's not different. It's not a loss of information. They're just different things. They're different chemicals. And that's basically what it boils down to, is that genes or DNA is a chemical. And differences in that chemical between one chemical and another person's chemical is not a degradation or a loss of information. It's just a change in genes. So I don't know what this degradation actually looks like. I don't know what loss of information looks like.
Okay, well, I guess, if you want to deny the fact that a deletion of a DNA letter is not a loss of information.
Standing, I'm sorry. We'll let you respond during your closing. I know that you have a response, and that's why I feel terrible. I know that each of you guys always has a rejoinder in the barrel ready to be shot, but I just want to make sure that we keep on going with the format. With that, we do have 4-minute closings, and we had started with Standing for Truth. So Standing for Truth, if you want to carry your conversation right over into that 4 minute, you're welcome to. I will set the timer for 4 minutes, and the floor is yours.
Awesome. Okay. Well, you know what? Evolutionists like Godless Engineer here, they have to avoid the fact of admitting that, there is genetic degeneration, because evolutionists, they assume that mutations, for example, that they're the creator, but we know they're the destroyer. Mutations are not construction, they're destruction. That's what we see. They assume that these mutations have a net neutral effect, which we now know is wrong. And the major problem here, and he gave us some examples of, lactose intolerance and all these things, which can all be explained either through a loss of information, and he wants to know what a loss of information, for example, what that is. But the best beneficial mutations, they're mostly reductive. I'll give them an example. Sickle cell anemia, for example, it has a significant impact, but it's a broken gene, it's a broken protein. In the long run, it's not taking things forward. If he wants to take his fish to fishermen, if he wants to take his particles to people, he's going to have to take things forward. There needs to be a net gain in information, and all we see is a net loss of information. For example, natural selection, no one disagrees with that. Beneficial mutations, of course, are mostly reductive, as I've shown here with sickle cell anemia. If it's a broken gene and a broken protein, that implies a loss of some kind. So it's an evolutionist tactic to avoid the obvious data by asking, questions like, well, what is a loss of information? I mean, that is exactly what we see, is 100 new mutations per person per generation. Beneficial mutations are rare anyway. Sometimes I just say, you know what, give them 1 or 2 beneficial mutations, because 1 or 2 rare beneficial mutations are not going to counterbalance the information loss. He did bring up, I'm trying to touch on everything. He did bring up, radioisotope dating, and that's used to date igneous rocks. And these are rocks which, form when hot molten material cools and solidifies. And the radioisotope dating, for example, the clock, it starts when a rock cools. And once the rock cools, there's an assumption there that the more atoms can escape, and any daughter element found in a rock will be the result of radioactive decay. But the dating process then requires measuring how much daughter element is in a rock sample, and then knowing the decay rate. For example, uranium into lead or potassium. But these are all based on assumptions, okay? Obvious, unknowable assumptions. For example, the initial conditions of the rock sample are accurately known, or the amount of parent or daughter elements in a sample has not been altered by processes other than radioactive decay. I've given actual evidence in genetics. Bones found in the dirt, they're not inherited. Traits are. I've given testable, falsifiable predictions on flood geology, catastrophic plate tectonics. What do the rock layers show? Ocean waters flooded over the continents. Evidence? Well, we see marine fossils in rock layers covering the continents, widespread, rapidly deposited rock layers. More evidence, the rock layers that can actually be traced all the way across continents and even between continents. And I look to the ENCODE project that
38
kind of
seconds.
How much? 30 seconds?
38 seconds.
38 seconds. Hopefully in his closing, he can actually address, the evidence that I gave about a literal Adam, a literal Eve, the 3 major haplogroups. I mean, these 3 LMN, they're unique. They're separated by small differences, and the lines radiating out, they're long, indicating, more differences. And we've made predictions based on the placement of the L. And all of this, all of genetics points to a biblical-based model and points away from an evolutionary model. Thanks so much, James.
Thank you, Standing for Truth, for your closing statement. And Godless Engineer, I've got the clock set at 4 minutes for you. I'll start on your first word.
All right. So I think that mostly what I've heard here tonight, which Standing will disagree with, is basically God did it. God made all of these things in the ways that they are, and therefore, because the Bible says so, it is so. And I feel like that's what his argument boils down to. And any of his supplemental evidence or information is only used to back up the biblical model. And so that's why I feel like he's using a lot of pseudoscience here in order to justify his position on the matter of evolution. He wanted me to go over like the Adam and Eve thing. It's funny that he mentions that, because there's actually not enough genetic diversity in only 2 individuals for spawning an entire population of a species. So you're going against a lot of genetic information, like a lot of genetic studies and a lot of basic like science that you would have to forego in order to make the assumption that there literally were only 2 humans that started out and created by God or whatnot. And if you disagree with that, which I'm assuming that you do, they're Standing for Truth, then I would want you to tell me, what does the perfect human look like to you? Starting out, like what did Adam and Eve look like exactly? That they were so perfect that they were able to, spawn an entire population of organisms. just off of them two. Also, I would love to hear exactly how that population, like that repopulation effort worked there, both for Noah and for Adam and Eve. But anyways, Standing for Truth likes to speak of DNA as if it were a computer system or a computer language. DNA is chemistry. And so it is bound by the laws of chemistry and therefore acts in a chemical way. So the information that he's talking about here are different chemicals that appear in DNA. And there's a lot of different processes that go into how DNA is both read and generated and copied and all of that. And so him saying that it's information, like it's some kind of like computer code, is really disingenuous and does not actually represent what DNA actually is. I didn't hear any good explanation as to what a loss of information is. He brought up sickle cell anemia, which is a genetic mutation that results in a disease that is not survivable. But I mean, I would lump that into the bad mutation part with whatever kind of extra things that may come with sickle cell anemia. If it affects the survivability, it would be considered a bad mutation and detrimental to the organism.
A minute 5 left.
5 seconds?
No, it was a minute and 5 seconds.
Oh, minute and 5. Okay. So I didn't really hear a good description of what genomic decay is, or any what like gene degradation is, or what does it look like for an organism's genes to degrade. I mean, honestly, you would expect to see, like, I guess a lot more of genetic diseases and stuff come about, maybe. But even then, on the evolutionary model, you would expect to see those types of changes in a population, especially with how many people there are on the Earth, and the fact that we've moved into an era of humanity where natural selection no longer has a direct effect on our survivability. So, another thing is that he uses this genetic entropy, like I was talking about before, and one of the foremost proponents of it, Sanford, actually acknowledges that experiments have not borne any data that indicates genetic entropy.
Excellent. We are just in time, so thanks so much, Godless Engineer, for your closing as well. And we will now move into the Q&A. So forgive me if I think I've caught every question. So forgive me if I haven't, but I'm really confident we're like staying on it pretty well. So with that, thanks for your patience, and I'm going to set the timer. I know that in case I had missed any new subscribers, I did just want to give a welcome to the ones that I for sure saw up on the screen. I want to say thanks, Nick Piazza, for joining us, as well as ADP _OZ, Carl Leo, Chrismer, Steve Garnett, N/A, NA, and then Derek Smith, Heavy Holler. Thank you all very much. We're stoked to have you here. And as mentioned at the beginning, we're kind of trying to build an eclectic community. We love diversity of thought. And so no matter where you are in terms of your views or lack of views, whatever you want to say, we're glad you're here. So with that, jumping right into them, I'm going to try to make this quick so that we can get through as many as possible. I'm Sorry Wilson said, thanks for your super chat. We appreciate it. They said, so a dog from a non-dog would prove evolution, or would it disprove it?
Who's that to? Is it me or?
I'm not sure. If you both want to respond, you can. But I wasn't sure myself.
Well, I mean, as far as evolutionary theory goes, dog to non-dog would take place over a lot of generations because of the buildup of mutations that occur in an animal. Plus, if the animal changes environment, that can also induce necessary changes in various ways. And so it would take a long time for it to become a non-dog, but eventually you would have an organism that is not recognizable as a dog.
You got it. And then Sandy, if you want to respond, you can. Standing, are you alive? Standing?
You're muted, Standing. I don't know if you're talking.
Oh, sorry about that, guys.
Scared me there.
No,
Sorry.
You're like, where'd he go? Yeah, I would just say, you know, obviously, what does empirical science, you know, tell us? It tells us that, you know, dogs produce dogs. And evolutionists will always say, well, of course, you know, dogs produce dogs. The law of monophily, you know, we can never outgrow our ancestry. A eukaryote will never stop being a eukaryote. A mammal will never stop being a mammal. But at the end of the day, that's why they have to appeal to time. When you ask them, you know, well, then do you believe dogs today ultimately came from something that was non-dog long ago and far away? And of course, they have to say yes. And then that's when they appeal to their, you know, SpongeBob, fairy tale, imagination, land of dogs, elephants, and pine trees being related. So I think that's where you jump from, you know, a simple change in allele frequency and populations over time into something that's just not demonstrable or observable.
Can I clarify something real quick, James?
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, so I did notice that there were some people in the chat saying no, it would still be a dog. And that's why I emphasized that it would take a long time for something like that to happen. But like in the case of whales, you have a quadruped land animal that moved into, you know, more watery area and kept moving deeper and deeper into the water. And then eventually it lost its hind legs. And, you know, we have fossil evidence for all of this. So, I mean, I'm saying that given the correct situation, the correct environment and whatnot, it could eventually change into something that doesn't look like a dog, because whales and dolphins do not look like the quadruped land animals that we see that were the proto ancestors of them. So that's what I was explaining. I was just trying to explain the evolutionary process, I guess.
Well, I think if I could just say one last thing,
so
because
sorry, Standing. Just because you wanted to make a clarification, I know you have you always have a round in the chamber ready to be fired. I know both of you guys do, but
I'm sure we could go on for another 25 minutes. You're right.
Just a let's see, Canderman, thanks for your super chat as well. He asks, question for Godless Engineer: why do you consistently let him not answer your question? So.
Well, I really tried to hold the fire to your feet there, Standing, on loss of information and genetic decay. I still don't know what those mean, but I didn't want to get hung up on one particular thing. I didn't want to get hung up on one particular topic or subject, so it's just a circular argument kind of thing. I did want to move past it, and that required some concessions on my part. In general, as I'm sure Standing felt that he had to make some concessions to move on and whatnot on his.
Well, yeah, I do appreciate the fact that I think within the 25 minutes, we touched on a number of things: flood geology, genetics, you know, evolutionary theory in general. So I think that was good. I do obviously believe that I did address, you know, your question of a loss of information in regards to just mutations in general, whether you're looking at deletions, inversion mutations, duplications. You can actually sequence the genomes. You can put two genomes side by side, and you can see reductions in fitness. For example, you can see a shrinking
function. I'm so sorry. I know that I hate to do this just to get through as many questions as possible, Standing. I hate to do that.
I just wanted to force that out. Sorry, James.
We're going to try to jump forward. Brian Stevens, thanks for your super chat. And also Tech Satan, if I'm pronouncing it right, thanks for subscribing. We're glad to have you here. I saw that. You're right. So Brian Stevens asked, he said, this is true, and since it's true, it's falsifiable. I wasn't sure what he was referring to. If either of you know, let him.
Well, I mean, okay, go ahead, Godless Engineer.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think that he was simplifying what Standing was saying, being that, oh, I'm saying this is true, therefore it's falsifiable. He was breaking it down to its simplest components.
Well, and the thing is, you know, that whole, you know, God did it, or even if you're looking for a cure for cancer and you just say God did it, like, of course that's not going to advance science. And that's why, you know, we've made very precise, very specific testable predictions. I'll use one example: mutation rates on the most divergent of African people groups, the Khoisan peoples. They haven't been measured. We've actually made and put on paper a direct prediction on what their mutation rate will be. And the evolutionist can go do the exact same thing. The evolutionist actually doesn't want to, for many different factors, many different reasons, but we've we've gone and done that testable prediction. That's not the only one. I mean, we can go on and on and on. The DNA code itself, the functionality versus non-functionality. So now it's not just God did it. We're actually taking, you know, something from the Bible, making a testable prediction and making it falsifiable. So I disagree with the fact that it's just God did it. We've got confirmed predictions and future predictions. So I just don't want to be misrepresented, of course.
Gotcha. We just to move forward really quick. Sigifredo Sarabia, thanks for your super chat. They had said, so God made the earth, and God was like, hold up, this thing is boring, it needs more things. I'm going to put dinosaurs on that dirt, dinos on that dirt. Then he was like, why did I put dinosaurs on that earth? I think they're trying to say, like, why would God make dinosaurs and then kind of like regret it later?
Well, I don't think he regretted.
Why would they
go extinct? He regretted dinosaurs. Who's that question to?
I think
it was a
you,
super chat.
Oh, okay. It's kind of more of a statement. Yeah, if you want to say something, Godless Engineer, go ahead.
Oh no, I mean, I feel like the statement is more in the vein of like, why does God allow things to go extinct, or why has 99% of life on Earth actually died or gone extinct?
Well, exactly, and that's why, you know, according to the biblical base model of the fall, you know, the fact that the Bible records a time when people had extremely long lives, and we look to mutation, you know, low impact mutation accumulation to explain the lifespan decrease of, say, early biblical characters. So based on the fall, that's why we see this death, degeneration, extinction. That's what we would expect, devolution in regards to a biblical based model. But evolution, you know, predicts and expects the exact opposite of that. So that's why it's contradictory to all known empirical evidence. Dinosaurs, you know, they would have been brought on the ark as well. That's why you see all these, you know, dragon stories, legends of dragons, Alexander the Great, Marco Polo, St. George, story after story, legend after legend. You see hieroglyphics, artwork, pictographs. Even in the dictionary, I think hundreds of years ago,
Just
next to the word dragon, it said now rare.
Pithy.
I mean, how do you explain that? The Leviathan,
so
the Behemoth.
sorry to cut in. I know that you've got a lot to say, but I just want to, just so we can get through as many questions. Did each of you get to respond to that one?
Yeah.
Okay. Barry Switzer, thanks for your super chat. He said, standing for truth, you aren't making testable, falsifiable predictions. Those are simply ad hoc statements.
Well, no, so he obviously doesn't understand the fact that in regards to the LMN haplomap, there have been very specific predictions made on the most divergent peoples, say the Khoisan peoples, their mutation rates. There's been actual predictions made on because if this is a marker of time and this is the history of civilization, you know, the LMN, they're very unique. You look at the map, you know, usually I screen share and show that, but they've all seen the map. They're unique. They're separated by, you know, shorter lines indicating, you know, pre-flood times and post-flood times radiating out. So we should be able to read the map, you know, the history of civilization, you know, the Roman Empire, the Greeks, the Persians, and that's actually being done directly from this map. So that is, for one, there's confirmed predictions there and future predictions. So, I mean, they can just put their fingers in their ears all day and all they want, but it is testable and falsifiable predictions, all flowing from the placement of the L.
So sorry, just to keep you short.
I'm sick of the misrepresentations.
Just to keep you short and pithy, I've got to try to move to the next one. DePooch, thanks for your super chat. We appreciate it. I saw you didn't write anything, but if you do want to write anything, you can just put it in at Modern Day Debate as like a normal chat, and I can read it for you because we appreciate your super chat. Brian Stevens, thanks so much for your super chat. He said, caustics, namely, so it's Caustix, claims I don't understand logic because it took me a long time to respond to him. He's a genius, and his moral argument, Kalam, has convinced me of God. I'm not exactly sure.
I don't think that's a question. That's just a statement.
I think that might be for somebody, Caustix Soda in the live chat. I'm not sure.
It is.
That's I don't know if it's sarcastic or if you guys are buddies or if you're trying to headhunt. I don't know, but we appreciate your super chat, and that's good to know about Caustix. So we appreciate that. Next one, I'm sorry, Wilson. Thanks for your super chat. This person said, Godless Engineer, where did the water go?
Where did the water go? That's a good question. Because in the flood model, do you know how much water it would have required to cover the entirety of the Earth? Because, I mean, I've calculated, and it's a crap ton of water. I mean, it's so much water that we don't know where that water went, because it's way too much water that's actually here on the Earth or even in our local group.
Well, where do you
So,
think the water came from according to Genesis? Just to see if you're strawmanning. What does Genesis say the majority of the water came from? Go ahead.
well, I mean, it came from up underneath the ground, but there's not, like I'm saying, all of the water on the Earth in general does not account
Well, we
for.
have empirical evidence that there is water. Like, for example, when it talks about the fountains of the great deep breaking open and the windows of heaven were open, it's not like all this water just came from the heavens. You know, we know that there's subterranean chambers that you can actually see and observe today. That, and all the water, you can see it in the oceans. I mean, if you just flatten out all the continents, I mean, you're gonna flood the earth. There's more to
Oh,
the
trust me, I know about
than
flattening out the
that.
globe.
Gotcha.
See, the scope and scale of the energy produced by the flood is amazing, and I think that evolutionists, for the most part, they have kind of a warped view of
Okay,
what
we
the
got to keep it
Genesis
short and
flood was
pithy. We've
about.
only got 4 minutes left, or not even. This is embarrassing. I forgot to set the timer on the Q&A. That's super embarrassing. Let me find. I think I'm trying to think of a rough estimate. How long do you think we've been going for Q&A so far?
I think you're about right, 20, 21 minutes.
Okay, so let's say we have 4 minutes left, and I hate to cut in, but just next one, we appreciate those. And also, Candor Man, question from Candor Man, thanks so much. They asked, ask standing for truth, why deleterious mutations haven't made bacteria die out?
Well, that's a good question. I think it was last time that either himself or somebody else asked that. I can't remember. But what's interesting about bacteria, you can just Google, reductive evolution in bacteria, and they are known to, lose genes, lose information. I know Godless Engineer is against, losing information or what it means, but you can just read paper upon paper about reductive evolution in bacteria. And Lenski himself, he's actually observed and demonstrated reductive evolution, because the beneficial mutations, and there have been beneficial mutations observed in his experiment, but they've all been mostly due to, reduction, loss of function, loss of promoter, loss of genes. And what they've done is they've gotten rid of genes short term, but it's long term degeneration. So Lenski, with his long term bacterial experiment, he's actually demonstrating genomic decay. And obviously, bacteria, they're going to go through more rounds of natural selection. They have more generations than, say, humans and higher mammals. But even bacteria are being observed to lose information and be susceptible to this genomic degeneration. So it's everywhere. Viruses, bacteria, mammals, everywhere you look, there's genetic entropy.
Gotcha. We had a super chat come in. Thanks so much. I'm sorry, Wilson, who said, I'm sorry, could standing for truth let Godless Engineer answer? I think that's for you, standing for truth.
Does he want to answer what I just said or something?
What they said, I'm sorry, could standing for truth let Godless Engineer answer? I think they thought that you weren't letting Godless Engineer answer. If you want to respond, you can.
I think it was a fun debate.
Gotcha. Hold on one sec. I could have sworn the fellow Steven Steen either was trolling me or he had said that he shot a super chat in and I didn't want to miss it. I mean, you can never trust that guy, but give me one sec. I'm going to just quick see if I can find. And I could have... Next question, though, in the meantime, was Salem Coop. Thanks for your question. They asked, was there animal death before the fall? Can you give verses to back up your belief?
No, I don't believe there is animal. The Bible says that death came by one man, by one man's sin. sin. So no, I don't believe that there is death before the fall. I think, for example, in regards to genetic entropy, I believe that Adam and Eve and the created kinds were created perfectly. For one, with heterozygous gene sites, so that would explain the genetic diversity that Godless engineers said that there wouldn't be enough of. But yeah, I don't believe that there is death before the fall. And I think the fact that it says, by one man death entered into the world, I think that's clear indication that there wasn't any death before sin, before the fall.
If I can ask real quick, Standing, what is your idea of a perfect man or perfect woman? Like, what do they look like in general?
What did Adam and Eve look like in the original creation?
Sure.
Well, I would say that based on, the fact that we inherit 100 new mutations per person per individual, you take that genetic entropy back to a point of least genetic entropy. I don't know exactly what they look like. I can't really draw you a picture, but that would be a genome of, for one, created diversity without any, mutational load, genetic load. So,
would blonde hair, blue eyes? Is that? You think blonde hair, blue eyes would be the perfect?
Well, I don't believe that they would have a belly button because, they were the first created. And that's probably interesting because, Adam and Eve's kids, they would know that, okay, Adam came directly from God, no belly button. They probably looked like, if you were to do, like I always say, if you were to do blood tests and then weight and height, you're going to get evidence for, say, a young person and evidence for an old person. I say that's what we see in the universe as well.
If I can just cut in, forgive me, just so sorry, Sin, just to be short.
Good question. That's a good question.
To keep you short and pithy, we had a super chat. Stephen Steen did give a super chat. I missed this one. I'm sorry about that, Stephen. He said, James hands down won this debate with his smile. That's very sweet, Stephen. You have no idea how much that means. Let's see. Sigifredo, thanks for your super chat, Stephen. And also, Tommy Fuller, thanks for your super chat. They said, modern day debate out, standing for truth. Why do creationists change subjects so often, i.e., biology, geology, cosmological, abiogenesis?
That's a good question. I think it's because trained creationists, we study and we research various subjects, while a lot of evolutionists you discuss, it seems like they want to stick to just one thing. And if you venture off to something else, they'll kind of say, well, I don't know much about that kind of thing. But they're the one promoting evolutionary theory, and yet they'll say things like, well, I don't understand genetics, all that much. Well, then why are you making all these videos, promoting evolutionism, debunking biblical creation? So I just think well-trained creationists, they're well-versed in a multitude of subjects. I think it's a good thing. I think it's an asset.
And then a quick follow-up question from Tommy Fuller, and thanks again for that super chat, Tommy, who asks, standing for truth, what is created kind? And kind they put in all caps. I think they're asking, what is a created kind? Or what? Let me make sure.
If an animal can bring forth, it's the same kind. For example, a wolf and a domestic dog, or a wolf and a coyote, they can interbreed. They're probably of the same kind. A wolf and a domestic dog, they can't interbreed with a banana plant or a pine tree. So, they'd be different kinds. So if you can bring forth,
that's a bit disingenuous, don't you think?
No, I think I just gave you.
How do you explain ring species?
Ring species, if you look at ring species like squirrels and rabbits, any 5-year-old can tell you they're the same kind of animal. And the thing is, if you're losing the ability to interbreed, you're losing information. There's obviously...
But no, that totally, like, you're being hypocritical here. Because on one hand, you're like, oh, it's the ability of it to bring forth its own kind. But with ring species, they actually diverge so much genetically that they can't interbreed anymore. So... like they wouldn't like one particular species wouldn't be able to breed with another particular species and bring forth an organism. They would be genetically incompatible.
Well, you can look at genetics to identify what's actually related and what's not. For example, orphan genes, taxonomically restricted genes, that can be used to identify what's created, what's not. You can look at unique DNA differences, mitochondrial DNA differences across families, across genus. So there's multiple ways of breeding tasks. So if they could originally bring forth, they're of the same kinds. That's why we got to do various.
I know you guys have done a ton of reading, and so that's why I hate stopping you. Forgive me for that. Let's see.
That's a
that,
long
I think
4 minutes, James.
that does bring us to the end of the Q&A, and I'm really sorry about that. This is we're thinking about doing something different, namely because thanks. Gosh, sorry about this. Okay, really quick, I want to read this off really quick, and then we have to close the Q&A intake. I'm sorry about that. Thanks for your super chat. I'm sorry, Wilson, who said GE and SFT are human animals. So, guys, remember that. Thanks for that super chat. We appreciate that. And then
that's a good statement to end it on, I guess.
yes, you guys are both beautiful animals. And we had thanks Taliesin Overlander for your super chat, who said, I just want to say, want James to say, woo la loo la you. So, thank you for that. We totally appreciate that. One thing that
we said we can't have fun while we're debating.
Yes, this has been fun. One thing we're contemplating, because I know that we sometimes have a challenge. We have a ton of questions, and they're awesome questions. And then it's like, I kind of want feedback, because sometimes we get super chats and we read those first, and I'm kind of like, and sometimes we run out of time for the questions in addition to that come after we read the super chats. And that's something that some people have said, like, hey, especially for people who don't have super chat in their country, because if we sometimes read only super chats because we have a limited time, that's like, I'm like, oh yeah, that's not very fair for them. So let us know. We're going to try to think about how to handle that, because we only got through like a few questions at best from the question list after the Q&A, and so we're working on that. Maybe we would intersperse the super chats. I don't know. It's harder for us to go longer, but we'll try to figure out what we can do about that. But thanks for all of your questions and super chats. I want to say thanks so much to our debaters, though, the speakers. We've totally appreciated their time and their energy. This is a superb debate. I not only did everybody in the chat enjoy it, a lot of positive feedback. I really this is thrilling. So we really appreciate that. And if anybody wants to host an after show, let me know. We can put it in the description, and then we can even announce it if you want. And so thanks so much. With that, I want to say again, one last thank you to our debaters. Thank you for being here, guys.
Thank you so much, James. And Godless Engineer, I want to say thanks for, maybe it got heated at times. I think it was fun. It was nice that there was, over 200 people watching. It's all about giving them a good show. It's all about having a good time. So I enjoyed myself. I enjoyed debating you. So maybe we can do it again one day. And thanks a lot, man.
No, thank you, James and Standing for Truth, for having the debate tonight. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I thought that it was a really good discussion. I really enjoyed having it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys. And with that, hope everybody has a great night. I totally appreciate you being here. And then we hope that you take care.
Are we off air?